What's living in Hawaii really like? I'm Chris. This is Yellow Productions. I do travel guides that are fun, informative, and entertaining. This video, it's a live stream, and on this live stream, I'm going to be joined by special guest Chris K, resident of Hawaii, who's got a really great channel all about Hawaii, who's going to be joining us to talk about what it's like to really live in Hawaii. Chris, welcome to the live stream.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. Aloha to everyone watching, and I look forward to just answering any questions that I can about what life is like here in Hawaii.
Well, it's my pleasure and our pleasure for sure for having you on today. And so let's go ahead and get right into it. How long have you lived in Hawaii?
So for me, I was born and raised in Hawaii. I graduated from high school here, which if you're from Hawaii, you know it's a pretty big deal to graduate from one of the high schools here. But I always wanted to go to the mainland for college, so I went away for several years, lived in Colorado, and then I went to Oregon and back to Colorado and California. And in 2012, I moved back to Hawaii, and I've been here ever since.
Cool. And when you say you moved back to Hawaii, what part did you move back to?
So originally I'm from Oahu, which is the sort of the main island with Honolulu, and I currently live now in Honolulu with my family.
All right. And so living on Hawaii, people always talk about island fever. Do you get island fever living on an island?
For me personally, I don't really feel that, and I think it's because I have so much to do in Hawaii. My family is here, my aunties and uncles, my parents, of course, my brothers. So, for me, as long as I have my family here, I think there's enough for me to do, enough restaurants and places to go. But I think for other people who maybe come here and they want to live in Hawaii, I think it can kind of set in maybe around 3 to 5 years, because there's only so much you can do really here in Hawaii. After a while, you've been to all the beaches, all the restaurants. It gets a little repetitive. So, yeah.
We've got some people on the live stream wishing you an aloha. Adam says aloha. Lindsay
Aloha.
gives you an aloha.
Oh,
And Never Without Kai Keats asks if it gets toasty in Hawaii.
yes. It's been a pretty hot summer. I think last summer was really warm. This summer wasn't as bad as last summer, but it's probably about 89, 90 degrees. But we have wonderful trade winds, so it's not as bad. It feels a lot cooler than it is, but it does get pretty hot.
I think, by the way, Chris says that living in Hawaii, if you come from a dry climate, which is where I come from, it's the humidity really that's the worst, and I think not as much the heat
Yeah,
as the humidity.
yeah, yeah. You'll feel it right off the plane. You'll feel it.
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah,
sure. It's
yeah,
like you
yeah.
stepped into a, I don't know, like a wet
Yes.
blanket or something, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
The real YT loves my Hawaii shirt, Aloha shirt, and we'll get into that
Yeah.
in a little bit. Um, Traveling the world wants to know, what's your favorite island to travel to? So you live on Oahu. What's your favorite island to visit?
My favorite is definitely Kauai. I think if you want to experience what I guess the Hawaii lifestyle used to be like, or just more laid back, a very tight community, I think Kauai is the best place to go. It's so laid back and very slow. I think the speed limit is relatively low. Lots to do outdoors. Hiking is very nice. The beaches, of course, and the people. I have family there, so every time we go to Kauai, I get to stay with them and just hang out.
Yeah. So speaking of living in Hawaii, what do you think is something that people expect about living in Hawaii that just really isn't that way when they get there?
Hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is probably the lifestyle. I think, especially if you intend to live in Hawaii, you probably visited Hawaii or you've seen things online and it just looks amazing, right? It looks like a huge vacation, like everyone's at a luau and just this island lifestyle. But I think when you actually come to Hawaii and you are living here, you're working here, you're driving, through traffic, I think you sort of realize like, yeah, this isn't what I thought it was. And most people don't realize that until it's kind of too late. And so that's part of what I think my channel, I try to do is try to show that, it's what Hawaii is like for like a normal person. If you live here, your kind of your daily life, some of the things that you might eat or drink, but not so much the tourist stuff, because I think there's a lot of that pretty much on Instagram and I'm sure YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. And for those who haven't been over to Chris's channel yet, Hello from Hawaii, I think he does a really great job of giving that locals perspective. He recently did a video talking about his favorite Hawaiian sun beverages, which if you don't know, these are like the classic fruit drinks of Hawaii. And he
Yes.
talked about what his favorite flavors. What was your favorite flavor, Chris?
Yeah. So this was mine.
Passion
This
orange.
is the passion orange.
Uh-huh.
That's the classic. That's what you drink when you're a little kid. It's very popular, and it was my favorite. It surprised me though. I thought I'd like some of the other ones, but it's really good.
My favorite is the Lily Koi Passion. And
Mm.
speaking of being kids, I drink it with the really big kid bendy straw, you know?
Oh yeah.
All right. And actually, as I've shown those in California, people often go, I didn't know you could get those out of Hawaii. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and I get this here at Tokyo Central, and Tokyo
Mm.
Central is the name of Don Quixote here in California.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, okay. So speaking of things that might not be that way, when people think about Hawaii, they think about hula. And so, does everybody in Hawaii know how to hula?
No, I can definitely tell you. I don't know how to dance
Not
that
even a
way.
little.
Yeah, no,
No,
not
okay.
even a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
but my wife, she's a dancer actually, and originally she's from Japan, and she came to Hawaii to learn more about hula, and that's actually how we met. So she's amazing at dance, and she actually performed at our wedding,
Oh
which
wow.
is kind of a tradition, I would
Yeah,
say, at Hawaii weddings, where the bride will perform just a quick hula for all the guests. So it was really nice. I was surprised. I didn't think she would do that. So it was a nice surprise to see her.
that's really neat. At our wedding, my wedding in OC Girl, we did not dance at all because both of us have two left feet. So we did a first song instead.
Oh,
Um, but you know, it's funny. You mentioned your wife being Japanese and learning how to hula in Japan. It does seem like whenever I go to Waikiki and I see the like outdoor luau lessons, it's like 99% Japanese tourists that are definitely learning about how to hula.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, 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 definitely.
Um, let's see. Ricky says, "Hello from Hawaii. I recently
Oh,
discovered your channel and it's good. Subscribed." So,
awesome.
and the
Thank you.
real YT just subscribed as well. So, thanks
Oh,
for
thank you. Mahalo.
supporting another great YouTube channel. Um, let's see. Sports on the side wants to know if Hawaiian Punch is authentic.
Not the one that you typically find in the stores. I think the red one, right?
Yes,
Probably,
the red
yeah,
one.
probably not too authentic, but I guess is that the brand name? I think it's the
I
brand
think it
name.
is.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
the brand
yeah,
name. Hmm.
yeah.
Traveling the World wants to know what are some must eats in Hawaii?
Wow, there is so much food to try when you come to Hawaii. I'm sure you made several videos, right, about cheap eats and food to try. I would say try some plate lunches. People love acai bowls if they can, shave ice if you can. I think a lot of the smaller restaurants offer some pretty unique dishes. So yeah, when you come to Hawaii, I'm sure there's guidebooks and things, but yeah, some of those smaller dishes I think are really great.
What's your favorite restaurant in Hawaii?
So my so my favorite restaurant is actually called Zippy's. It's sort of like this family restaurant. They serve a lot of like local foods. I'm trying to think, like the equivalent might be like kind of like Denny's, so not really outstanding, but I personally like it. It's one of the places that I go to regularly, and again, it's very nice, a lot of variety. I think they're open late. At least in the past, they were open late, so we would always go there after. We go hang out at night, and they're always open, so we'd all go out together. So yeah, Zippy's for me. I love the zip pack. It's like a bento with rice on the bottom, and it has like pieces of meat. So if you love meat and rice, it's very ono, very good.
Very Ono. Yeah, I love Zippies as well. It's always when I go to Hawaii, it's always a stop I have to go to. And I like that in addition to like the food area, they typically have 3 areas and like the bigger ones, right? They've got like the sit down
Yeah,
diner, the like the to-go
yeah.
place, and then the bakery. So I love the like the
Oh,
baked goods
yeah,
from there as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Capital XRP says, as a semi-regular visitor to Hawaii, do the locals really use aloha and mahalo, or is it just a tourist thing?
I think a lot of locals still use those words. I think you probably find more people throwing up a shaka, especially when they go driving. When we are on the roads and you want to let someone come in, it's pretty common to throw up a little shaka just as a quick thank you to let you kind of merge into the lane. So I think it's pretty common with some locals, and you'll hear it a lot, of course, in a lot of the touristy hospitality places as well.
Yeah, I think that actually speaking of drivers and going into lanes, I feel like the drivers in Hawaii are some of the friendliest anywhere, and I do love the shot to be like, hey, yeah, just
Yeah,
come on in, it's cool. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
sports on the side wants to know how popular is spam?
Very popular. We have this thing called I think it's Spam Jam, and they had to
Oh,
cancel it this
I've
year.
never heard of spam
Oh
jam.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's where they make all these different dishes out of spam, but it's very popular. And I'm sure if you're asking about spam, you may know about the spam musubi, which is the like Hawaii snack. It's probably one of the most famous to come out of Hawaii. It's rice with spam nori, and you can add different things to it. But it's very very popular. Whenever they say that there's a hurricane coming, people buy a lot of spam and they just stock up.
You got to have your spam.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Amy wants to know, what about driving in Hawaii? I've heard it's dangerous and not to rent a car, but then I've heard you have to rent a car. So, how's driving, and do you have to rent a car?
I think overall Hawaii, in terms of driving, I think it's pretty safe. You can't really go too fast because we're on an island. I know when I drove on the mainland, some of those drivers were going pretty fast, especially like in California when there's so many lanes, and it's a little overwhelming from a local boy, island boy's perspective.
Yeah.
So you can't really go too fast here, especially on Oahu, some of the neighbor islands as well. In terms of renting the car, yeah, if you're a visitor, you're probably gonna have to rent a car. But with things like Uber and Lyft, there's a lot of alternatives too to get around. The bus system is pretty good here on Oahu, but yeah, you're probably gonna have to rent a car to get around here if you want to, especially go outside of Waikiki or wherever you're staying.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of people often ask me, Chris, can I get around with like Uber or Lyft? And on Oahu, you can kind of.
Yeah,
On the other
kind of.
islands, not really, because
Mm.
like on Kauai, like you open up the Uber app and there's like one driver on the whole island.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. And then even then, let's say that driver is driving when you're there, you might not have cell phone service where you are because cell phone service,
yeah,
because of all the mountainous areas, isn't so great. So.
yeah, yeah.
I often recommend to people that if they're going to Oahu, like I recommend to stay in Waikiki for a few nights, not get a car, and then get a
Mhm.
car and then go stay someplace else, so that way they can
Yeah.
avoid paying the like $50 a night extortion fees for parking in Waikiki.
Oh yeah, yeah. Although I think we do have some free parking nowadays since everything's been happening, but we'll see how long that lasts.
That's probably true. There's
Yeah,
probably less
yeah,
people in Waikiki right now.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Raj wants to know, how cold is it in December?
Uh, I guess it depends. I would say, and cold, it's like a pretty relative term here. It doesn't really get cold, but it might get to maybe 70s, 60s. Depends on where you are. Some places can even get to like 59, and that's cold. I know in Hawaii, if it's in the 60s, you'll see people wear like jackets and like sweatshirts, even though it's really not that cold, especially like on the mainland. When I was in Colorado, I loved 40-degree days. Just go outside. It's so nice. But yeah, here it's a relative cold, and you'll get yeah. I would say probably get away with a jacket in the 60s here in December-ish. Yeah.
Yeah, I speaking of cold, so one of my trips to Hawaii, I was like leaving and a cold spell had just started. I think it was 68 degrees, and I was at the airport.
Oh
And yeah, I
yeah.
remember one of the airport workers, I'm like, hey, how's it going? They're like, oh, it's so cold today. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm sweating, It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. The real YT wants to know if the majority of people know how to snorkel or spearfish.
I think there's a lot of people that do swim or they do fishing, spear fishing. It's very popular. I can say that I don't know how to do those things. I know how to snorkel, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think it's a pretty good mix of what people enjoy actually doing here in Hawaii. There's of course the beach, but hiking, and there's just a lot of different activities that you can do. So I wouldn't say that all of us, surf, for example, or spearfish, but it's very popular among a lot of locals.
Okay, now not everybody might spearfish or surf, but what about play the ukulele?
So again, I would say no. I definitely don't play that, but I think in the education system, we have a Hawaiiana class or Hawaiian studies, and through that class, a lot of the children are required to bring an ukulele to school, and then they kind of learn the basic, the my dog has fleas
Yeah, yeah, sure.
type of thing, and then you kind of get some general knowledge. But I think beyond that, most people probably couldn't play.
Yeah. So my wife, OC Girl, has taken up ukulele. We actually bought an ukulele on one of our previous
Oh,
trips to Hawaii,
nice.
and so that's kind of
Nice.
like a lullaby that we play to our
Mm.
daughter. Is we sing like Pout Pout Fish or things like her sung to ukulele. Um,
Nice.
so, so I noticed, Chris, you are wearing an Aloha shirt today. I am also wearing an Aloha
Yes.
shirt today. Are Aloha shirts and muumuus really considered dressy attire in Hawaii?
Yeah, that's a really good question because that's one where I think when people come to Hawaii, they're kind of surprised about like the dress code for especially business.
Yeah.
And I would definitely say yes. Aloha shirts, very dressy. Most men, especially downtown Honolulu, you'll see them. They have aloha shirts, pretty similar to this, and some of them wear it tucked, somewhere untucked. Very rarely will you find anyone wearing a suit and a jacket and a tie, unless you're an attorney. So I would say, yeah, the aloha shirt's very popular for work. It could range from, a very cheap aloha shirt to, $100, $200. And with muumuus, it's definitely a pretty formal dress. I think that a lot of older women maybe wear. My wife, I don't know if she has a muumuu, but she wears a lot of designer dresses with Hawaiian print on them. So I think maybe that's more common. But yeah, with muumuus, I think maybe mostly older women, I think, wearing them.
Yeah. Speaking of like Aloha shirts, do you have a place that's like your favorite place to go to get Aloha attire? Costco, Macy's, the swap meet, yeah.
Well, so for me, I actually didn't really wear aloha shirts because I was on the mainland for so long. So I
Uh-huh.
came with my dress shirt, and
Okay.
after a while, it kind of looked weird because I'm the only one wearing, a dress shirt, long sleeve. And so I went out and bought some aloha shirts at one of the local Goodwills, and they have a ton of aloha shirts. So I would say if you're looking for aloha shirts, you can get them for like $2
Yeah.
on
Good
like
deal.
special days, which is really good. I also like some of the other brands. Kahala is one. Bishop Street, Cook Street. Those are really nice brands that I tend to go and buy. I do like the more subtle, I guess, designs. And there's just a whole bunch of different designs you can buy though.
Yeah, and so when Chris talks about subtle design, so typical like aloha dressy attire in Hawaii is not like a loud color like this. Like if
Mm,
I was there for a work meeting, I would
yeah,
not wear this yellow shirt. Like it's a YouTube channel, right?
yeah,
And I have to wear yellow,
yeah,
so that's why I have a yellow aloha attire. But they're often
yeah.
like you go to the ABC store and everything is like red and
Mm.
orange. But I
Oh
find
yeah,
like the business ones are much more like the shirt you're wearing, where it actually looks like a little bit of the color's been almost like drained out of it a bit, right?
yeah. It's
Like it's
almost
been
like
washed.
faded.
Yeah, 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 for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Rico B asks, can we visit Hawaii now if we have a COVID-19 test within 72 hours? Thanks. And there's been a lot of questions about that, and so I'm just
Yeah.
gonna ask his, and maybe you can briefly address the current travel situation.
Yeah, sure. This is very exciting. We've kind of just figured out what we're doing as a state in Hawaii. The new program for the pre-travel testing, I believe, starts in mid-October, and that's probably what the person's referring to
Yes.
when it comes to visiting Hawaii. Uh, I was a lot less confident when they announced the plan that it would actually happen, but now that we're roughly 2 weeks away, I would say I've grown in confidence only because they've really done a good job of explaining metrics and systems, whereas before it was kind of just pushing it back, pushing it back, pushing it back. So I think the state is ready, and we'll see what happens, what tests they'll accept. There's so many questions and exceptions, and it's we're sort of learning and trying to figure it out as locals, what's allowed and what's not allowed. Even within visiting different islands, we still have to quarantine. So if I were to go to Kauai, I can't go out. There's no testing that I could even do for that. So it's very fluid at the moment. And I would just say, if you're looking to visit Hawaii anytime soon, watch, look at the news, look at the government websites, the governor's website, lieutenant governor's website, for the most up-to-date stuff, because it's really changing almost every few days, every week.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, I put out the video about Hawaii's reopening last week.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people say, like, well, Chris, you said that like CVS and Kaiser are going to be doing tests, but I called them and they say they're not. And it's like, well, it's also September 29th and not October 15th. And so I'm sure these places are like, the people who answer the call centers have the information that somebody wrote 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And so I think if you have flights booked, it'll almost be like, look 4 days beforehand to figure out, like where you can get tested and how that's all going to work. All right. Amy likes both of our shirts. So thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
I appreciate the kind words. And then Kathy says, we can't visit yet from Australia. That's true. International travel is still hard. Lisa wants to know if you recommend going to Diamond Head while on Oahu.
Yeah, for a pretty nice hike. I think it's, one of the most popular, probably the most popular attraction, I think, here on Oahu. Maybe that or the Pearl Harbor Memorial. But if you have a chance, Diamond Head is great. Parking's a little tight, but once you get to the top, it's beautiful. You can look in different directions. We did it, I think, a couple of years ago. We did a morning hike. It was pretty dark on the way up, but we got to see the sunset, and that was just amazing. So I would highly recommend it if you get a chance. But there are also other hikes too, depending on your level of fitness and kind of how hard do you really want to work for the beautiful view. But yeah, Diamond Head I think is a great choice if you're looking for a pretty easy hike, one that's pretty close to Waikiki.
Yeah, and I think if you are going to do Diamond Head, as Chris said, like the morning's good because it's not too hot. I think a lot of people struggle on it just because of the heat and humidity, and they're not used to it. If you're going midday, parking's rough. But if you're staying in Waikiki, it's a short taxi ride. So if I'm going midday, I'll just generally take a taxi there, and there's usually taxis waiting on the bottom to whisk people back to Waikiki. So Chris, you mentioned that you lived on the mainland for a while, and then you moved back to Hawaii. What keeps you living there now that you're back there?
So for me, it's family. And I know a lot of people have different reasons why they stay in Hawaii, because it's hard sometimes to live here. As beautiful as it is, it's hard sometimes. But for me, family, Ohana is probably the biggest reason that I'm here. My parents are here, my brother, aunties and uncles and cousins, and it's just so nice to be close to them. And it's been actually one of the biggest stresses I've had personally during this whole time, because we're not allowed to really get together with people from different households. So there was a time where, just me and my wife and son were stuck here, and I couldn't go and visit my parents, which is really hard. They're grandparents now. So I think stuff like that has been pretty difficult for a lot of local families. But that's what keeps me here. That's what I miss the most when I was on the mainland. Even though they had, I mean, there's food, there's weather, all these great things. But really, I think when it comes down to, it's just you miss family, and that's what I love when it comes to Hawaii. It's so focused on family and community.
For sure. And I think even if you don't have family in Hawaii, like if you get to know people who live in Hawaii, right? Like they treat you like family, you know?
Yeah, it's called Hanai family.
Right on.
Yeah.
So what's your least favorite thing about Hawaii?
So for me, the least favorite thing is the cost of living, and specifically, it's the housing. And I know a lot of places struggle with this housing, affordable housing. But I can just speak for myself as someone who's starting a young family. The housing options are pretty limited. I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a place before I got married. A lot of people are not, and it's just because these places are so expensive. And I think that's going to push a lot of people my age and definitely younger to be moving, looking to the mainland, the West Coast, place like California, Washington, Oregon, Vegas. A lot of people from Hawaii end up moving to those places because it's so hard to make it. And for me, I hate seeing them go. People that I grew up with, my classmates and friends, and even my family, some of them have had to move away, and it's because it costs so much to live here.
Yeah. So how much does it cost to live there? I know people always say, Hawaii is expensive, but maybe you can give us all a perspective about what that really looks like.
Okay, yeah. So I did look this up, and just to read off a quick number, I want to make sure I get it correct. So for rent, why single family homes are 2,200 a month, and that's just your regular home. And it does vary depending on where you choose to live, of course. If you're on Oahu, it's going to be a little more expensive than places like on the Big Island. If you're looking at renting a 2-bedroom, you're looking at about $2,000 a month. And again, that it fluctuates depending on where you choose to live. Honolulu being the most expensive. And of course, within Oahu, the closer to downtown Honolulu, the more expensive it's definitely going to be. Things like gas, people love Costco here because it's kind of like the one equalizer, I think.
Yeah.
In terms
I
of
love
price,
Costco there too, for sure.
Yeah, it gets
the hot
everything
dogs and the pizza are the same price, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's great. So you'll see a lot of people filling up gas at Costco. I think it's $2.30-ish or so. Regular gas at the gas station is about $3. And then you're looking for just plain food. Bread's on sale for $3 to $4. Milk is $6 to $8, and eggs are about a dozen. A dozen is about $4. So those are just some of the smaller costs that you have to consider. It may not seem like a lot, but over time, if you have a family, you're going to have to feed them, and this is a recurring cost. So it's one of those things where over time it can add up and make it pretty expensive.
Yeah, the milk and orange juice prices at the supermarket always blow me away when it's like $10 or something for like orange juice. Man, I know. I'd probably just drink water.
Yeah. I miss the cheap prices.
I'm sure. Wu Taiwan Nostalgia, speaking of housing, asks whether Hawaii has a large homeless population.
We do. For a while, I think we were the number one per capita, which is kind of embarrassing because we're a tourist destination. And there was a time where, I think back in about 2015, it was very visible here. And I was so surprised because, I came back and in 2012, and I thought, things were how they were when I had just graduated high school. And just to see it evolve over that period of time, those 10 years, it was really shocking to see. But yes, unfortunately, we do have a homeless issue. And I know that the state and city and a lot of the government agencies, nonprofits have tried to help. It's really tough. And we'll see, hopefully, based on what's happening now with our economy, we don't see an increase of that because there's a really good chance that once the eviction moratoriums start to go away and people have to pay back their rent, I don't know how some people are going to make it. And so hopefully we don't see a large spike in homelessness here.
Yeah, for sure. I've noticed just the homeless trend increasing as I've been visiting throughout the years. And in Waikiki in particular, I've just noticed there's like a lot of professional homeless, you know, that like every time I
Yeah.
go there, it's the same guy who begs me for money. And so like now
Yeah.
I've learned to recognize them to be like, it's you again from 6 months ago, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't give you money then.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jenny
Yeah.
says I'm drinking her favorite drink. Jenny, this flavor, or do you have another flavor that's your favorite?
Awesome.
Let's see. There was another question here about Joe asks, Chris, do you have any recommendations for night markets or street food areas?
Well, we do have a lot of farmers markets. We do have a lot of, I guess it depends on what types of foods you're interested in eating. Nowadays, it's really hard because of the restrictions. But places that we like to go that are somewhat walkable, we go to Ward, which is in Kaka'ako in Honolulu. It's a lot of great restaurants. I'm not sure I'd recommend Chinatown for that, but they also have good dim sum and other types of foods that you might enjoy. But yeah, I guess it just depends on what you're looking for. And things are so different now that, a lot of people are just doing takeout, and we just opened up for dine-in at 50% capacity. So we'll see what happens with a lot of these strolling, walking around things. But back before that, yeah, there are a lot of nice places. Kaka'ako is a great place to go check out some food.
You are 50% capacity, doing better than we are here in Orange County, California. We're at 25% capacity, which
Oh,
means most restaurants don't even bother because they're like, oh, it's like
oh,
4 tables, you know?
yeah.
I think the closest for me, like street food recommendation, I feel like Hawaii doesn't have a lot of street food or night markets per se.
Mm,
But if you want kind of like something that's close to that experience, I think some of the food trucks on the North Shore, particularly like Giovanni's
yeah, that's
Shrimp
good.
Truck,
Mm,
and you eat a Giovanni Shrimp Truck, and you're there at these tables, and there's like roosters walking by. I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, it's a local experience for sure with a bunch of tourists,
yeah.
you know. Just Air Experts wants to know if you've ever been to Molokai.
I have not. That's one of the islands that I haven't been able to go to, and I'm not really sure what there is on Molokai. I know there's famous bread there, and I'm sure there's some hikes. But yeah, I personally haven't been to Molokai yet.
That makes two of us. I have also not
Oh,
been
okay.
there.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, Hawaii is a place that there's a lot of tourists who come. What do the locals think about all the tourists?
So I think there's this love hate relationship with tourists, and obviously Hawaii is pretty much set up for hospitality. So we love tourists to come here and spend a lot of money. And in the past, we've had about 10 million last year come to Hawaii, which was a record, and that's a lot of people for a small place with only so many hotel rooms and only so many resources that we have. So it's getting a little bit tight. Of course, now with how tourism is, I think they marked it at like 98% or 99% down from last year. So we're
Yeah,
really
it's crazy,
suffering,
right?
and we miss the tourists. And I think a lot of locals now see that if they didn't necessarily think about that before, maybe they kind of resented tourists for coming here because we're really hurting a lot of local businesses, not just the hotels, but just a lot of the smaller shops are really hurting. But on the opposite side of that I think that resentment or that conflict, I think it really comes out of maybe not understanding the culture, the environment, the people, and maybe some tourists, not all, but some not showing that respect for coming to Hawaii. It's sometimes hard to remember that Hawaii is a place where people live, and it's not an amusement park that people can just come and visit and then they do whatever they want and then they leave. And I think showing aloha, showing respect, I think is very important to locals. And I would encourage any tourists that do come, especially now with how things are going to be changing, just keep that in mind. Respect the rules that we have here, respect the people, and I think that hopefully that's something that they can bring back, like that aloha spirit of just being respectful to others.
Yeah, I think that to your point, I mean, that's a lot of places that resent tourists. I think are places
Hmm.
where like there's also like a big culture difference between the
Oh
locals and the
yeah.
people who come there, you know? And so I'm not picking on New Yorkers, but I'm just going to use New Yorkers as an archetype of people, right? Like New Yorkers come to Hawaii and bring the whole New York spirit and vibe, and then I think the people, it's like, okay, can I get my food and can I get it now? And it's like,
Yeah.
we're on island time right now, You'll
Yeah.
you'll
Oh,
get your
yeah.
pancakes when you get your pancakes, That's just kind of like,
Yeah.
because that's kind of how we roll here, right? And if you're not good with it,
Yeah.
then like go back home, right? And so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there is that. I wish more people, as they came to Hawaii, would try to slow down and live like the locals, and as you say, show people
Yeah.
respect because they live there.
Yeah.
Liesel wants to know, what's your go-to dim sum place?
Oh wow. There's so many places. It's really hard. I'm thinking of like, yeah, there's so many in Chinatown. It's definitely one of the best places to go, and you can just probably walk to like several and try.
While
Yeah, I don't
you
know.
think, how about I throw out two, and then maybe you can
Okay.
think if one comes to mind. And so I'll start with the easy one because a lot of people go to Waikiki. In Waikiki, there's a Tim Ho Wan that recently opened there, and it's like a Michelin-starred dim sum from Hong Kong. It's not the cheapest dim sum, but it's in the
Mm.
like the Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center. I like it because it's dim sum
Oh,
all
okay.
day, so you can get dim sum at like 8 p.m. And then my second favorite dim sum, I think it's called maybe like Legends. It's in there's like a Chinatown plaza that's like a multi-story plaza,
Mm.
has like a Sun Yat-sen
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
statue. There's like it's a pretty big dim sum
Oh, yeah,
place. So
yeah, yeah,
those
yeah,
those
yeah,
are my
yeah.
two favorites.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would agree with Legends. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
cool. Wu Taiwan wants to know if there's any soup dumplings or xiaolong bao in Hawaii.
I'm sure there is. We have a lot of Chinese restaurants, and again, Chinatown is a nice place to go. I think if you kind of just want to wander around, and there's a lot of great bakeries and a lot of good lei places. Of course, restaurants are there. Nowadays, I haven't actually been there in a while, just because of the restrictions, and so I'm not sure exactly how that place is right now. I would be a little cautious if you were to go nowadays, but yeah, a while back, yeah, I think you can probably just wander around, and I'm sure there's tons of restaurants down there.
For sure. Traveling the World has a question for you, and he asks which national park you prefer. And I can never pronounce the first one correctly. So, Chris, I'm going to
Oh,
let you pronounce that one so I can learn how it's
okay.
pronounced, and then I'll let you answer that question.
Okay, so Haleakala.
Haleakala. Thank you. All right.
Yeah,
So, do you prefer
yeah.
that or the Volcanoes National Park?
I like volcanoes. I went there on a field trip when I was, I don't know, in middle school, I think. Went on a band trip. So we got to go and visit. So I would say, yeah, volcanoes, Volcano National Park. I think it's great. It's something that we don't really get to see here on Oahu in terms of an active volcano or any of that type of stuff, since the volcanic activity is really down on the Big Island. So it's always nice to see that. Of course, you can see Haleakala, and it's beautiful. And if you get a chance to do both, I would recommend it.
Cool. Rowdy suggests dim sum for Jade Dynasty and Golden Duck. All right, thanks for the tip.
Hmm.
And I saw a question from someone from Australia asking if there's dim sims in Hawaii. Dim sim is like the name of dim sum in Australia. They call it dim sim instead of dim sum. I don't know how that
Oh,
changed
okay.
language, but yes, for
Hmm.
sure, there's dim sum in Hawaii. I,
Okay.
I often refer to Hawaii as the United State of Asia. So, like, if you're looking for the best Asian food in the U.S., I think you'll often find it in Hawaii. I know some of the best Japanese katsu that I've had anywhere outside of Japan
Mm.
is in Waikiki, and
Yeah.
it's all Japanese people from Japan eating there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, speaking of that, though, is it weird to live in some place that a lot of people don't actually consider part of the USA?
I would say no, mostly because when you live in Hawaii, when you grow up in Hawaii, you kind of don't really think about outside of Hawaii too much. And
Yeah.
I can, speaking for myself, uh, the only time that I realized that Hawaii is not the center of the whole universe is when I went to the mainland, and I realized that people don't really think about Hawaii all that much. Like when you grew up here, it's all local news and weather, and it's just local high school sports, and you don't really think about the rest of the country. And of course, now with the internet, it makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, I don't think it bothers too many locals because we really have our own culture. We have our own you know sets of communities here, and yeah, for us, we just keep living and just keep doing our thing.
Yeah, I always find it's one when I talk to people, sometimes people will say things like, and I meet them like someplace not in the US, right? Like when I'm on travel, and they might say
Oh,
things like, oh yeah, I've been to Hawaii. I'd really like to visit the US sometime though. Well,
yeah,
you did, as a matter of fact.
yeah.
But speaking of the mainland, is there something on the mainland that you wish was in Hawaii?
I think for me, it's the biggest thing is snow, and for places
Mm.
that are really cold, I'm sure you're probably wondering why. We typically don't have snow here in Hawaii. There are some places that do have snow, but I grew up my whole life without seeing snow. So the first time I saw snow was when I went away to Colorado for college, and um, I remember the first day I saw it, I didn't know what it was because it was flying from the sky, and I was,
Yeah,
what
right,
is this?
right.
And it wasn't even sticking to the ground. It was just melting, and I just
Yeah,
thought, wow, this is like amazing. And so I miss snow a lot. I miss that smell of snow and that crunch. And it's just I wish we had more seasons and we could experience more of those things. But I think a lot of local people would probably prefer some of the businesses that we don't have here still in Hawaii. I think that the two biggest for sure are Trader Joe's and
mm,
IKEA. If they ever came to
mm-hmm.
Hawaii, they would just, I mean, it would be yeah, they'd be so packed.
For sure. For some of the international visitors, if you're not familiar with Trader Joe's, it's sort of like I call it like a boutique supermarket chain in the U.S. They have just a
Yeah.
lot of like really well sourced, high quality goods that are pretty inexpensive.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
David wants to know if you've ever been to the road to Hana in Maui.
I think I've been on the road, but I was probably a lot younger when I was a little kid. I would go out to the neighbor islands a lot more and travel way back then when tickets were a lot cheaper. But I haven't been there recently. But I'm pretty sure I've been on that road. Yeah.
I started the road to Hana, and it was a trip I was on with my mom to Maui, and I think we got about 45 minutes into it before we were like, we are getting sick from all the like hairpin twists and
Yeah.
turns, and we're like,
No.
I think we'll
Yeah.
just go back. So, yeah.
Yeah. I was,
I am kind of excited maybe to try the road to Hana again because the hotel that's in Hana has now being rebranded to a Hyatt. And I have a
oh, okay.
gazillion Hyatt points. Before I was like, do I want to spend $400 a night for this hotel? I'm not sure, but maybe when it's points, then it's not as big of a deal. Jeff talked about winter, would be happy to switch with you and says you can live
Oh,
in
okay.
Pittsburgh this winter and he'll live in Hawaii.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely don't miss driving in the snow though. That was one of the
Yeah,
worst things. And ice,
yeah.
Ooh, that was really bad. But it would be so nice. I think it's like 90 degrees today, and it would be so nice to have like a 30, 30 degrees or 25 degrees. It'd be so nice.
For sure. So speaking of people who live in Hawaii, there's some like kind of unique terms for people who live there: Hawaiians, locals, natives. Can you give us the rundown of how to refer to people who live in Hawaii?
Okay, yeah. So this is something that comes up quite a bit for people who aren't from Hawaii. Not everyone from Hawaii is Hawaiian. I think that's a big, uh, I guess, misconception that people might have. Not everyone is Hawaiian. There are Native Hawaiians who are people who have ancestry that from the people who first settled in Hawaii. So Native Hawaiians, and then there's locals, or if you're from Hawaii, you live in Hawaii, you're born in Hawaii, you'd be like a local. So like for me, for example, I'm not Hawaiian or Native Hawaiian. Um, my background is Japanese, but I am from Hawaii, so I'd be considered like local. And there's a really big difference between the two. So I think that's important, especially if you do come here, you visit, if you start throwing out everyone is Hawaiian, uh, most of the people you probably meet are not going to be Hawaiian, and they might look at you a little strange. Um, term native, I would say I don't think I've ever really heard that. It's just the term native by
Yeah.
itself. It sounds kind of like tribal, kind of old.
Sure. Okay. Sure.
So yeah, so I would say that term is definitely not a term that we use here.
Okay. Good deal. Um, so we talked a lot about Waikiki and things in Waikiki. How often do locals, not natives, how often do locals visit Waikiki?
I would say it's pretty rare, and mostly because there's not really much for locals to do for fun there in terms of that they can't find in other parts of the island. So obviously Waikiki has a lot of jobs, so people might go there for to work if they work in the hotels. But in terms of like doing things for fun, there are a lot of other beaches that I think are way better. And I think everyone has their own little favorite beach that is not in Waikiki. And I think I think locals are okay with that. We kind of gave up Waikiki in that way for the tourists, and that's where people stay. And we tend to, I think, keep out of Waikiki unless it's a special occasion, maybe a staycation or a wedding, something like that. And it's unfortunate because there used to be the international marketplace, and it was great
Mm-hmm.
back in the
Yep.
day.
Yep.
And you
Yep.
can buy so many unique things, and then they changed it to like this really high end shopping center, and now we can't buy it. I mean, there's nothing I would go there for. So it's a little sad. We might go to Cheesecake Factory as a local. You might go there, but there's not really much for us to do there that we can't really go, in our own little cities or towns.
Yeah. You mentioned beaches. Laura asks a question: where do the locals surf? What's the best kept secret locations? And maybe you're not going to give away any secrets, but maybe you can share
Yeah.
what's popular to surf, or what your favorite beach is, since you mentioned that everybody has like a favorite beach.
So I can speak for myself. I really like Lanikai Beach. I think it's probably the probably the most beautiful beach I've ever seen. The water is so clear there out in Kailua. I think you can't go wrong with that. In terms of where I think a lot of locals like to surf, it probably depends on how the surf is doing. And there's the surf report that we get to kind of talk about how the waves are. Where they're low, or whether they're big waves or small waves. But typically, the big surf is probably going to be North Shore. I've probably seen some of the huge waves out there. It just gets gigantic. So North Shore, maybe some on the east side, south side, depends. But yeah, people, they kind of just pick their favorite beaches and they tend to stick to them. But yeah, the secret beaches, yeah, we try not to talk about them.
Yeah, because they're secret, right? If they were secret, if
Yeah,
you gave it away, it wouldn't be
yeah,
a secret anymore.
yeah.
Uh, there's a lot of comments about the road to Hana and people
Oh,
who either turn back or things like that. Vic
mm,
said he actually vomited on the road to Hana. So Vic, it sounds like I made the right decision to turn back when we were doing
yeah.
that. But speaking of the opposite of vomit and of food, a lot of people go to Hawaii for this food that's spelled Poke. And so, how's that pronounced? Is that poke, pokey, poke? And after you tell us how it's pronounced, like what do you think is like one of the best places to go get that food?
Yeah, so poke is pretty popular, and it's something that a lot of
So
local
poke,
people.
like okay,
Yeah,
poke,
poke.
okay,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
okay with a
poke.
P in front of it, right?
Yeah,
It's not poke,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
not
yeah. It's
pokey,
not poke.
poke,
Yeah,
right? All right, good.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's a very popular food. Unfortunately, I'm probably one of the, I won't say few locals, but I'm probably one of the people that doesn't really, I don't really particularly like it. It's if you're not familiar with poke, it's like raw fish, and it's marinated in like a sauce, and it's served over some nice rice, and people here love it, just not me. But I can't speak for my wife, and her favorite place is Off the Hook in Manoa, which is in Honolulu. And she absolutely loves that place. We've been to it a couple of times already. And when she was pregnant, of course, she couldn't eat any raw fish. And that was the first place that we went
Oh, after,
after she
yeah,
gave.
right
Yeah.
on,
Oh,
right
yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll have to check that out next time I'm in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Speaking of something that's not food, sea turtles. Laura wants to know, are the sea turtles thriving? The Hanu.
Well, I would definitely. I can't speak about the turtle specifically, but I will say that since the tourists and a lot of things, or tourists haven't been in Hawaii, and a lot of the places have been closed. Hanuma Bay, for example, I know they've seen like the nature recover, which is really strange.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Maybe not so strange, but I find it amazing that you give it a little break, like, 6 month, 9 month break from tourists. And a lot of these places are thriving. And yeah, I would say the turtles are definitely affected by that. And they had some turtles um, uh, have hatchlings on some beaches that they've never really seen before. So I guess, yeah, I guess they're thriving.
That's neat. That's one of the silver linings about what's going on, right?
Yeah.
All right, so a few more pronunciation things. One of the things OC Girl and I always like to eat when we go to Hawaii is shave ice or shaved ice. Is it shave ice or is it shaved ice? Settle that for us. Does it have a D at the end or not?
Yeah, so it's shave ice with no D. And
Okay.
actually, if you're from the Big Island, they pronounce it ice shave.
Wow.
Which,
Wow.
yeah,
I That's interesting.
yeah.
So I've not been to the Big Island yet. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
do you think there's one island that has the best shave ice or ice shave?
that's really hard to say.
Yeah.
The best, I know Oahu gets a lot of attention. We have Matsumoto's and there's Wyola and all these different shave ice places here. I tried this pretty good shave ice on Kauai. I think it was from this Japanese couple in this like truck on the side of the road. It was really good. The line was very long for that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it was really good. But yeah, I think some of those places are very popular, of course, with tourists, and I think locals kind of pick and choose where they like to get their shave ice. But yeah, it's pronounced shave ice.
Cool. Thanks for settling that. Shannon loves Leonard's Bakery. Just a shout out for Leonard's. I also love Leonard's, the
Leonard's.
malasadas from
Yeah,
Leonard's.
malasadas.
So another pronunciation, just the name of the state. Is it Hawaii or Hawaii?
Yeah, so most people will say Hawaii with the W sound. I think the proper pronunciation would be Hawaii with the V sound, and I think that V sound is often used with the W when it's in the middle of the word, or not starting with the letter W. You have that V sound, but pretty much most people will just say Hawaii.
Yeah.
Um, and we also have the Okina, which is like that little backwards comma you might
Uh-huh.
see on some of the
Yeah.
words that we have. So yeah, people pronounce it different ways, like Kauai, for example. Kauai would be, I guess, the proper way to say it, but Kauai.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for settling that one. Both those too. And what about the state fish? How do you pronounce the name of the state fish? One of my favorite Hawaiian words.
Yeah, so it's called the Humu Humu Nuku Nuku Apua'a. That's that's a very long long word.
I should have had like
Yeah.
a title to put on the screen.
Oh
You know?
yeah.
I
Oh
don't,
yeah.
but yeah, that would have been
Yeah.
epic.
Yeah.
I'll just put your name
Yeah.
back up on the screen because I have
Oh,
that
okay.
title. Yeah, the state fish. I love some of those Hawaiian words.
Yeah.
Okay, tourist traps. Do you think there's any tourist traps in Hawaii? Like places people shouldn't go, people should avoid.
Well, for me, I don't really want to put any individual place kind of on blast. I don't want to call any place out. But I would tell people that if they do come to Hawaii, you don't have to do the typical tourist things. You don't have to stay in Waikiki or even go to North Shore. There's a lot of other smaller places, smaller communities here on Oahu or on some of the neighbor islands that you might want to go, and maybe they don't get that attention. And a great example is this small town in Kauai, Hana. I love that town. It's really small. You probably don't even notice it, but they have the best taro chips I've ever had.
Oh, I didn't get the
It's
taro chips. I did
wonderful.
go to Hana
Yeah.
though. I'm one of those people
Oh,
to
okay.
fly. I like what's some place that's off the beaten path, and let's go
Oh,
check that out,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful. I think last time I was there, I bought 10 bags and I brought them back on the plane with me. And then this woman who was sitting next to me, she was like, "Oh, what is that?" And I said, "Oh, these are taro chips. They're my favorite chips." And she was, she kept asking me questions, and I just ended up giving her a bag just so she could try take home with her.
That's cool.
But yeah, that's my favorite place for taro chips. Just really good.
Yeah. By the way, Kevin helped me out with that state fish and typed it in the comments so I could put it up. So thank you for that.
Nice.
Vic did share his opinion of tourist traps, which are the timeshare presentations. And so I think I would agree with you on that. Timeshare presentations, I think, are some of the biggest tourist traps. But, there's other people who say that they're happy to go spend 2 hours of their time to get a free or discounted room or something. So that's up to everybody else. Yeah. But I don't want to waste my precious vacation time sitting in death by PowerPoint. Okay. So there's a train that's under construction now in Oahu, right?
Yeah, we have the rail, and it's quite controversial here, and it's been going on for quite a while. And right now they're building it out from the west side of the island of Oahu out in Kapolei, and it's gonna supposed to be built all the way to Moana, which is in sort of downtown Honolulu. I think they're still kind of building it out there on the west side. They haven't come quite into town. I think it's about $10 billion right now.
That's expensive.
And yeah, and if you know that stretch of distance, it's not really that far, but it's supposed to help with traffic and hopefully get people not being on the road, so that it's not 2 to 3 hours a day of traffic for some people. It's just really, really bad. But there's delays, there's all these types of issues, personnel issues, leadership issues, and yeah, we'll see if it gets finished.
Yeah, I'm hopefully optimistic for it, because I think transportation's important. But to your point, I find it bizarre that it ends at Ala Moana and it doesn't end at Waikiki, which is like airport to Waikiki. That would be like really useful for the visitors, right? Yeah, for sure.
I know.
Because it always seems like my flights arrive at like 5 p.m. or something, which is just like, to get on the H1 in Waikiki, it's like death. It's like 9 miles, and I'm like, I'll be there in an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, last question for you. What's a typical weekend getaway for people who live in Hawaii?
So I think for local people, pretty much, probably I would say the beach is a great place to go with family. It's free, which is really nice. It's outdoors. You can eat out there. It's great. If you want to do something a little more structured or formal, we do staycations here. Waikiki is a great place to go. You can also go out to Ko'olina, stay out there at a place like Aulani is good, or Turtle Bay up in North Shore. But probably the most popular place for locals is Vegas. Locals love to go to Vegas, and we have all kinds of Vegas stories here. So I would say if people want to get away for the weekend, they'll just go to Vegas.
Yeah, right on. Vegas is like everybody's weekend getaway destination.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting to the bottom of our hour here, but there's always something we do on a Yellow Productions live stream.
Yes, it's the time you've been waiting for. It's time for the giveaway.
So we always give away some Yellow Productions Crew swag. It's going to be a Yellow Productions Crew t-shirt today. You can't see the logo back there because it's behind that thing. Right there, back there, the Yellow Productions Crew shirt. And so you will win the shirt if you answer my question. My question for you is, what is Chris K's favorite restaurant in Hawaii, and what's his favorite thing to get when he eats there? So you have to answer the restaurant and the dish. So if you answer that question correctly, you will get a Yellow Productions Crew shirt shipped to you anywhere in the world. While we are waiting for answers, Chris, I want to say I really appreciate you coming on the live stream today. And how can people tune into your content if they haven't found you already?
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. My YouTube channel is Hello from Hawaii. And yeah, it's just an awesome time for me to post videos. It's not my first YouTube channel, but it's one that I'm excited about and looking forward to making more content just about how life is here in Hawaii from one local's perspective.
Yeah, that's cool. And I will say, if you haven't gone over there yet, or at the end of this, if you want to just make it easy, in the description, I've put a link to the Hello from Hawaii channel, so you can just expand the description and get that. So it looks like Norman here. So I'm going to put this answer up on the screen, and you get to tell me if this is the right answer, because it's your restaurant, your dish. Is that the right answer, Chris?
Absolutely.
All right, Norman.
I want to go there now.
Right on, right on. Congratulations, Norman. You win Zippy's Zip Pack. Norman, you can send me an email to chris@yellow.net with 2 W's, or you can message me on Facebook. Let me know what size of the shirt you want and where you want me to send it to, and we will get it right off. Well, I know there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to today. So, Chris, maybe, in a few months or sometime, maybe you'll, be willing to come back on Yellow Productions, talk about reopening in Hawaii, and take some of those questions we didn't get to. Would you be up for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how things turn out. October and November, December would be great to kind of watch and see how the state figures how to open up safely.
Yeah, that's cool. And so if you guys want to stay in touch with life in Hawaii from a pretty friendly dude, check out Chris's channel. As usual, I won't say goodbye because I'll see you all in the next video.